Every science rests on a single valid theory. Physics rests on Newton's and Einstein's laws, not on contradictory speculations. Medicine rests on germ theory, not on folklore. Astronomy rests on the principles of motion and gravity, not on superstition. In every human endeavor, truth is singular. Reality does not contradict itself, and therefore neither can a valid theory. Mike Mentzer recognized this fundamental truth and carried it into bodybuilding. For decades, bodybuilding had been bombarded with dozens of conflicting systems, each claiming validity. Yet, as Mentzer forcefully argued,
it could not possibly be true that all, or many, or even two training theories have equal merit. There is and can be only one valid scientific theory of anything like medicine, astronomy, physics, electronics, mathematics. Likewise, there is and can be only one valid theory of productive bodybuilding exercise, and I'm convinced that it's the theory of high-intensity training.
This essay explores Mentzer's uncompromising position that there can be only one valid theory of bodybuilding exercise, why this is true, and why any appearance to the contrary is either a misunderstanding of theory, a misapplication of principles, or a distortion by drugs and genetics. Before bodybuilding can be discussed, the nature of theory itself must be understood. Mentzer defined it clearly.
A theory is a set of principles which claims to be either a correct description of some aspect of reality and or a guide for successful human action. What I want you to remember here primarily is that a theory is a set of principles.
The crucial word is principles. A theory is not a hunch, a ritual, or a tradition. It is a structured body of principles rooted in the facts of reality. And because reality itself does not contradict, there can be only one valid theory of any given field. Just as physics cannot operate under two contradictory laws of gravity, bodybuilding cannot be successfully pursued under multiple, conflicting training systems. Before we can see why only one theory is valid, we must be clear on what Mentzer's heavy-duty system actually proposes. His training principles rested on three absolutes: intensity, brevity, and infrequency. 1. Intensity. To be productive, exercise must be intense enough to stimulate muscle growth. Growth occurs only when the body is forced beyond its accustomed limits by effort carried to muscular failure. 2. Brevity. Exercise must be brief enough not to overwhelm recovery ability. Mentzer emphasized that intensity and duration exist in an inverse ratio. You can train hard or you can train long, but you cannot train both hard and long. Just as the faster you run, the shorter the distance you can run. The harder you train, the less time you can continue. 3. Infrequency. Training must be performed infrequently enough to allow not just recovery from the last session, but also the full adaptive response that results in new muscle growth. If you train again before the body has recovered and overcompensated, you don't build, you regress. These three principles form the core of heavy duty. They are not suggestions or preferences. They are grounded in physiology and therefore are universal. Now, having laid out the principles, we can turn to logic. One of the most powerful ways to demonstrate truth is through proof by contradiction. If high-intensity training were not the one valid theory, then productive training would have to be its opposite. That would mean training that is 1. Not intense enough to stimulate growth, 2. Long enough to overwhelm recovery ability, and 3. Frequent enough to prevent adaptation. That this is nonsense should be self-evident. Imagine, if you can, a training system based on avoiding overload, dragging sessions out until exhaustion crushes recovery, and repeating workouts so often the body has no chance to adapt. No one in their right mind would accept this as a theory, yet logically, if high-intensity training were not true, its opposite would have to be. The absurdity of the alternative proves the exclusivity of high-intensity training. Just as it is impossible to have two contradictory laws of gravity, it is impossible to have two contradictory laws of muscle growth. There can be only one valid theory of anything, because reality does not contradict itself. The laws of physics are not different on Mondays and Wednesdays. Gravity does not pull you down today and sideways tomorrow. If you jump off a chair, you fall every time, in every place, under every circumstance. That is reality, and it is absolute. 2 + 2 = 4, not sometimes 4, sometimes 5, depending on your mood. Mathematics is singular because numbers describe reality, and reality does not bend to opinion. Water is H2O. It is not H2O for me and HO2 for you. Its molecular structure is fixed, unchanging, and universal. Fire produces heat, always heat, never cold. The very idea of a theory of cold fire would be absurd. Astronomy is the same. Once upon a time, men believed the sun revolved around the earth. That was not another valid theory, it was simply false. Only heliocentrism responded to reality. The earth goes around the sun, not the other way around. And that truth applies to every human being on this planet, whether they like it or not. Medicine too illustrates this principle. Germ theory explains disease. Bacteria and viruses cause infection. They do not coexist as equally valid with superstition about evil spirits or bad air. Those old notions were not other truths, they were errors. Only germ theory explains the facts. Engineering provides another example. Bridges stand because engineers build them according to precise laws of physics. If there were multiple contradictory theories of structural integrity, bridges would collapse. Airplanes fly because of aerodynamics. If there were two contradictory theories of flight, planes would never leave the ground. The same is true in bodybuilding. The physiological mechanisms of muscle growth are not different for one lifter versus another. The formation of creatine, the synthesis of myosin, the biochemical cascades that results from intense muscular contraction, these are universal. They are the same for me, for you, for every human being alive. It cannot be true that one man's muscles grow by intensity while another's grow by endurance. It cannot be true that some bodies require overload while others flourish without it. Why many systems seem to work. At this point, critics often object, but many bodybuilders have built great physiques without using heavy duty. Surely their methods prove that there are other valid theories. The answer, as Mentzer explained, is that their success does not refute the universality of high-intensity training. It merely shows that, 1, they may have applied part of the theory in practice without realizing it. By pushing some sets hard enough to failure, they triggered growth even if they violated the principles of brevity or frequency. 2, they may have relied on steroids to mask the damage of overtraining. Drugs can artificially accelerate recovery, allowing the body to survive an otherwise destructive program. Or 3, they may be genetic outliers. Some men blessed with extraordinary recuperative systems and muscle-building capacity will grow under almost any stimulus, though they might have grown faster had they trained correctly. Thus, the fact that someone made progress under a conflicting system does not prove the system valid. It only shows that fragments of truth combined with drugs or genetics can sometimes compensate for error. The first principle, intensity. A valid theory must begin with the first principle, the foundation on which everything else rests. Mentzer identified it.
In order to stimulate an optimal increase in muscular strength or size, a set of an exercise must be carried to a point of momentary muscular failure, i.e. the exercise must be intense to stimulate growth.
This principle is rooted in universal physiology. All humans share the same biochemical mechanisms of adaptation. As Mentzer explained when refuting Arnold Schwarzenegger and Larry Scott's claim that, quote, the training requirements for stimulating muscle growth are different in everybody, close quote, contrary to what these two great bodybuilders might think, the cause and effect relationship involved in muscle growth is universal. The specific biochemical changes that result in muscle growth are the same for every human being on the face of the earth, and the stimulus required to induce those specific biochemical changes, high-intensity muscular contraction, is the same for everyone. And these facts have been empirically validated by physiologists. They are not the suspect opinions of non-scientists. Application versus universality. While the principles of high-intensity training Mike held to be universal, their practical application, he also pointed out, is very much particular, i.e., something that each individual trainee must determine for himself or herself. This is the crucial nuance. The universality of high-intensity training is not contradicted by individual variation. Rather, variation in recovery capacity only determines how the theory is applied, not whether the theory itself is true. The beginner trap. One reason so many bodybuilders mistakenly believe in multiple systems is the phenomenon of beginner gains. At the outset, almost any resistance training works because even light weights are a quantum leap in intensity compared to bodyweight exercises. But soon, progress stalls. At that point, the trainee must increase intensity, and then adjust duration and frequency accordingly. If they fail to do so, they spin their wheels. This explains why so many people gain at first on conventional programs, then plateau. Their early progress was not proof of those programs' validity, but simply a reflection of the basic principle of intensity. Long-term progress demands the application of all three principles of heavy-duty training. The efficiency argument. Another crucial aspect of theory is efficiency. Even if another method could produce the same results, if it required exponentially more time, it would still be inferior. Mentzer once pointed out, even if a system requiring 7 days a week, 2 hours a day could yield the same results as heavy duty, which required only 2 brief sessions per week, the sheer waste of man-hours would disqualify it as valid. Science does not settle for what works sometimes. It demands the most efficient, rational application of principles. Heavy duty, by reducing training to the essentials, exemplifies this. The sprinter versus the marathoner. Mentzer often invoked a powerful analogy to illustrate the relationship between intensity and duration. The sprinter versus the marathoner.
You ever compare the calves of a sprinter to the calves of a distance runner? I use this example all the time, but it's one of the best there is. The sprinter always has a large muscular calf. The distance runner always has a stringy little calf. Because he overtrains, he's chronically overtraining. And I would venture to say the majority of bodybuilders, top bodybuilders today who are training over 2 hours a day, would look like distance runners if they weren't taking steroids.
The sprinter's higher muscular intensity produces bigger, stronger legs, but necessarily limits how long he can run. The marathoner, by contrast, trains at low intensity for long duration and produces endurance, not muscle growth. The lesson is clear. The higher the intensity of work, the shorter the time one can sustain it. The Russell Principle. Why then was Mentzer attacked for stating the obvious, that only one valid theory can exist? The answer lies in human psychology. People cling to traditions, and when confronted with absolutes, they resist. Here, the words of British logician Bertrand Russell are illuminating. The degree of one's emotion varies inversely with one's knowledge of the facts. The less you know, the hotter you get. Mentzer's critics were often the loudest because they were the farthest removed from the facts. The further one drifts from reality, the more one resents the absolutes that expose the error.
When I mentioned the fact that I have finally mastered the fundamentals of bodybuilding science to someone on the phone recently, he said, "There you go again, posturing, Mentzer, always so damn certain. How can you possibly claim such a thing?" And I responded, "Didn't you, sir, master the fundamentals of mathematical science, namely addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division? I didn't say," I continued, "that I'm omniscient or infallible, or even that I possess an exhaustive knowledge of exercise science. Give me a break," I continued. "I'm a little slow. It took me over 20 years to master the simple fundamentals of bodybuilding science, and which may be summarized like this. To be productive, Exercise must be number 1, intense, number 2, brief, and number 3, infrequent. The fundamentals, in other words, relate to the issues of intensity, volume, and frequency.
Mike Mentzer's insistence that there can only be one valid theory of bodybuilding exercise was not arrogance, it was logic. Just as science and every other field recognizes that contradictory theories cannot both be true, bodybuilding must recognize the same. And the reason is simple. The physiological mechanisms of muscle growth are not subject to opinion or tradition. They are universal.